Hello guys, this is Daniel Learmouth. This is going to be an update on the state of the channel, now that I have my third and so far longest upload of the Retro Import review series. There are a couple things I want to go over with regards to this series and the channel itself, and what I plan to do going forward. I'll be talking about equipment. More importantly, I'll be talking about stuff that I'll need to make videos. It mainly comes down to needing a new camera, but I'll explain as we go along. For now though, the state of the channel. For a couple of years now, I've toyed with the idea of reviewing the import games that I own. I own roughly 100 Japanese imports across the PS1 to Famicom, even though it's only one game, and Super Famicom. Why imports in particular? Well, my goal when it came to this series was to showcase Japanese games from the perspective of someone who loves the libraries of the systems that they're on. There are also a few other reasons behind it. Firstly, I love Japanese stuff. I make no bones about that fact. It's all just very interesting to me. Secondly, my main motivation behind it is because there's a lot of games that are either released in Western territories but didn't do so well, or didn't release in the West at all. My eventual aim is to start covering games exclusive to Japan, and there are a couple places for me to start with that, but for now I'm going to take the path of least resistance in covering Japanese versions of games. Going forward, the channel will be focused towards Japanese imports. There will almost certainly be some miscellaneous content dotted around, but from here on in, much of anything I post to this channel will revolve around retro Japanese imports. In saying that, there will potentially be something else that I can do. Streaming. I will be streaming the games that I will be reviewing and using the footage that I record from that in the eventual reviews. Now, for the sake of clarity, I won't be using the facecam portion in those reviews if I decide to use facecam for the streams. I will only be using the camera for piece-to-camera stuff, like this. I'll just have to see how Streamlabs OBS's selective recording feature works to see how to do that. So, in summary, with regards to the state of the channel, my channel will focus on retro import review and associated streams. Miscellaneous content will still appear, but that won't be my bread and butter anymore, as I will be more focused towards imports going forward. Now, equipment. This is going to be an interesting thing to talk about, as I will devolve into 3 different categories. I'll save the camera for last, but for now, let's start out with game capture. At this time, I'm currently using an Elgato HD 60S. It's a solid capture device that's worked well enough for me so far, and has enabled me to work on this series. However, it's also very limited in its capabilities in comparison to what I could get. The main reason for that is because I have to use an open source scan converter in order to have the Elgato accept a signal that it might be able to use, and that doesn't always go the way I want it to. Super Famicom recording, for example, is practically impossible if I want the games to look good. The games will have to be run at 480p instead of 720p or higher, which is a major nuisance. PS2 games too will only record at 480 resolutions, which itself is a notable buggerance. Now, I know recording things in a higher resolution will only get me so far, but that's kind of the point of the scan converter. It's supposed to line double or triple or quadruple or whatever. I can't use it with something that's so difficult with unusual signal types. Which is why I ordered a Datapath Vision RGB E1S. I ordered it about a month ago and I'm still waiting on it arriving. It's still circling around Chicago as I speak, probably. In any event, you might be wondering why I ordered what is, in effect, professional grade capture equipment. Well, first off, it was relatively cheap. These things require a quote from the manufacturer to buy, normally. I, however, managed to snag one for shy of 150 quid. Which will be especially important for me down the road. I'll probably need to pay import and handling on it though. Secondly, I need to compare it with the equipment I have right now. My Elgato HD60S is only really able to deal with very specific resolutions and signal types. So I can feed it a 480p signal or a 720p signal via the OSSC, but only on certain devices. And that's where I go into why I wanted the Datapath. I wanted the Datapath for its ability to handle unusual signal types. Most retro consoles have a very different video output for each system, some of them even going on a game-by-game basis. Hell, some games can fall victim to the dreaded Chrono Cross problem of resolution switching. I don't know all that well about how the Datapath manages resolution switching, but based on one video I've seen, it seems to be okay, but with unusual signals, provided you know the kind of signal the system is pushing, you can work with that with the Datapath relatively easily. Now, if only USPS could hurry up and give me my goddamn computer part already. Next up are some more systems. So far I only have 3 consoles that I can review games on, primarily the PlayStation 1 and 2 and the Super Famicom. For the time being this is sufficient, but I will need to start hoarding systems soon. The first system I want to get is the Sega Saturn, and if you know anything about import gaming, you know that the Sega Saturn's library in Japan far outweighs what we in the West got, since the Saturn was actually marketed and had games for it. Shocker! There will be a few more systems that I intend to get my hands on from a manner of generations, like the Dreamcast, Mega Drive, GameCube, Famicom, N64, so on. There are a lot of systems that I could get potentially. However, being stuck with 3 systems isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it gives me a chance to be a bit more focused on what I want to cover. I've always had an affinity with Sony. I'm not going to pretend that's not a thing, and I tend to enjoy what Nintendo has, so, you know. Now on to the part that I want to talk about the most. Basically, the camera. For Retro Import Review, I use 2 different cameras. I use a Logitech C920 for piece to camera, and for B-roll, I used a camera on my Honor V20. I shoot the pieces to camera in 1080p, but I use my phone's camera to shoot at 4K. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like how this looks, but it's ultimately necessary because of how I edit the video. My intentions are to get a new camera, as in a proper camera with interchangeable lenses and the like, and can record 4K at 30fps or 1080p at 60fps without issue, and look good. And I already know what I intend to get. I intend to get a Sony a6400. It's a mirrorless camera, which means it has a relatively small body and few moving parts compared to a DSLR. It's also not super cheap, though compared to some cameras you can buy, it's chump change. It can record in the resolutions I want. I can use different lenses to get desired effects, and it's something that would allow me to bumble about and take part in photography alongside the eventual videography I would be focusing on using it for. It also has a few neat features, such as being able to use it as a webcam in effect, environmental shielding, which would make it useful in inclement weather conditions if I wanted to use it outdoors, and some extra stuff that would come in rather handy. It's going to take me some time to get it. A few months, in fact. All in all, the camera with a 16 to 50mm lens is going to set me back around £800. And then I'll have to get a tripod as well. Perhaps that could wait a little bit, actually. But yes, if I want everything, I'll need to save like mad. Thankfully, I've already got a bunch of games so that I don't need to worry about needing new material to cover soon. But this will mean the following 3 episodes, at least, of this series will be recorded, frankly, with sub-optimal equipment. Now, I do have a couple cameras at hand, such as this Sony Cybershot from 10 years ago. I got it as a Christmas present and it barely got used because I never went anywhere with it. The image quality isn't exactly amazing either. Alternatively, I have this Vivitar SLR camera from the 1980s. At least I have a few lenses for this at hand. This hand-me-down from my dad. And it has a flash module too. That said, I would need to get some 35mm film because I don't have any at hand. And that's a whole other minefield. But I could experiment with this. You never know. So, as a recap, I'll be focusing on retro Japanese imports going forward, and doing streams of games and recording the footage from them for the use in reviews. Other content will appear on the channel from time to time, but from here on, retro import review is my focus. 2. I'm currently waiting on my Datapath Vision RGB E1S to show up a month after ordering it. Hopefully it'll arrive sooner rather than later, but I super need it. 3. I'm currently locked on to the Super Famicom, PS1 and PS2 as far as consoles that I can cover games on. I do intend to expand my horizons in time, however, to systems like the Sega Saturn and so on. And lastly, I intend to get a camera that I can use for stuff, and I'm aiming for a Sony a6400, which will take me around 2 or 3 months to get. Hopefully I'll get it before the August episode of Retro Import Review. I think that about covers things. In the meantime, if you haven't already, check out my Retro Import Review series, where my most recent entry is about Zone of the Enders the Second Runner for the PlayStation 2. It's a long video, I'm not going to lie, but if you like the game, you'll probably like the video as well. Outside of that, if you want to see me cover something in the future, my VG Collect link is in the description to show all the games that I own for this whole retro doodah. My Twitter is also there for frequent updates, in case you're interested. But outside of that, I think that's it. So that should be it for now. This has been Daniel Learmouth. City.